Welcome to another video from Encarando o Sobrenatural Oficial. What you are about to hear now, analyze and understand in this video, is not just trivial political commentary or a passing item in the international press. This is the most serious, urgent and shocking warning about Brazil's economic, sovereign, financial and diplomatic future produced in recent years. The mainstream media, in the pages of major national newspapers and in the headlines of the most watched news broadcasts, is selling the public a carefully sanitized, palatable and seductive narrative. They portray the recent diplomatic approaches and high-level meetings between Brazilian and Russian authorities as harmless, modern and promising. A technological partnership focused on energy transition, the development of the commercial fleet, and the advancement of our country's transportation and logistics sector. For those who are already grown up and no longer believe in Santa Claus, they know that things are far from being just that. Behind this smokescreen and polished diplomatic jargon, what unfolds in the darker backstage of global intelligence and state power is the laundering of war equipment and the triangulation of stronger sanctions. The most dangerous, calculated and audacious operation of the 21st century. Our country is about to fall irreversibly and tragically into the geopolitical and military trap orchestrated within the BRICS bloc. And what if this set of agreements, memorandums and protocols of intent is approved? In practice, that is, if the Brazilian government takes one more step toward implementing these terms, we will be flat out and mathematically doomed. What has been devised in recent days in the offices of Brasilia, in the naval facilities of Rio de Janeiro, and in preparatory meetings in foreign capitals, does not represent the innovation boost to our domestic industry they claim it is. No, this is not about bringing cutting-edge technology to our shipyards or modernizing the productive capacity of our companies. In fact, this is a sordid geopolitical maneuver that diminishes the Brazilian state, its centuries-old diplomatic tradition, and its industrial sector, to the humiliating, criminal, and self-destructive role of an agent for international ill will. And the seriousness of this transition cannot be minimized. To understand with surgical precision how Brazil reached the edge of this diplomatic precipice, we need to reconstruct the events that took place in the first days of August. During the preparatory meetings and summit gatherings of the BRICS bloc, held in the context of international negotiations, in New Delhi, India, the Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation, acting through its high-ranking special envoy, Deputy Minister Alex Grudstev, put a shiny, tempting and deeply deadly proposal on the negotiating table. The Russian Federation formally proposed that the countries belonging to the BRICS bloc, but with an obsessive, central and strategic focus directed at Brazil, as well as India and China, expand massively, in a coordinated and rapid way, joint cooperation for the manufacturing, assembly, supply and development of unmanned aerial vehicle technologies, popularly known as drones. The legal facade, bureaucratic framework, and official rhetoric presented to the public and international organizations are impeccable, flawless, and extremely appealing on paper. The diplomats from Moscow and the bureaucrats from Brasilia claim in official statements that the partnership aims solely and exclusively to produce autonomous vehicles strictly for civilian use. They talk about using drones to optimize delivery logistics in hard-to-reach areas, for real-time monitoring of fires and deforestation in the Amazon rainforest and the Pantanal, in strengthening environmental protection and using cutting-edge technology for agricultural spraying and precision in the large grain farms of the Center-West, looking through the rear-view mirror of naivety, for the layperson, the ordinary citizen, or the inattentive analyst, all of this sounds like a technological blessing, a leap toward the modernization of agribusiness and environmental management. After all, who would dare oppose the use of technology to protect our forests or to lower the cost of food production, especially when we're facing a crisis like this? However, my brother, the absolute and inviolable rule of realist geopolitics is just one. Never look at what's written on paper, stamped with seals and official signatures. Keep your eyes fixed on the one making the proposal, the comrade holding the pen. And who is holding the pen in this negotiation? Who is on the other side of the table, offering technological cooperation and industrial investments? None other than Vladimir Putin, the autocratic dictator who leads a nation subjected to the heaviest, most suffocating and comprehensive set of economic, financial, technological and commercial sanctions ever imposed on any country in the modern history of humanity. Brazil is ignoring that saying, close to those who eat and far from those who work. In geopolitics, translating that, close to those who prosper and far from those who are sanctioned. Russia is now a state isolated by the Western financial system, banned from global supply chains, and boycotted by the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and all the major democracies on the planet. And everyone knows the reason. The conflict in Ukraine, which is plunging Europe right now into the biggest armed conflict since World War II. Russia is not spending diplomatic capital, sending ministers and mobilizing its intelligence apparatus to come to Brazil because it is concerned about the fires in Mato Grosso or the preservation of the environment in the Amazon. Russia is in a state of absolute desperation. Its military supply chain has been severely choked and suffocated by Western sanctions. Russian stocks of high-precision microchips, satellite navigation systems, gyroscopes, compact electric motors, and electronic components, essential to maintain the daily production of its war machine, are at critical levels. And it is exactly at this bottleneck point that Brazil has been placed squarely in the crosshairs. When the Brazilian government accepts the premise, either naively or as a calculated accomplice, of building a partnership under the civilian pretext of developing and assembling drones in partnership with Moscow, it agrees to turn Brazilian territory, the country's import laws, and our industry into a laundering operation for military components for the Russian regime. Is that really what you're hearing? Do you really think Russia is interested in developing civilian drones to protect forests and help crops? Do you really believe that, my brothers? Or is there more to it than that? Brazil becomes, in practice, before the international community, the front buyer, the logistics intermediary, and the broker of war supplies for the Kremlin's conflict effort. And the practical and technical reality of this maneuver doesn't depend on ideological interpretations. It's purely mathematical. Physics and military engineering. Ask an honest question to an aeronautical engineer or a defense specialist. Ask the following. My friend, what is the technical and structural difference between a civilian drone used to apply agricultural pesticides over a soybean field in the Brazilian Midwest and a military drone? A kamikaze designed to dive into residential buildings, power plants, and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine? If this expert really understands the subject, he would give you a direct answer, which is exactly, absolutely, no difference. The two drones are virtually identical. The carbon fiber structure is the same. The stepper motor or small internal combustion engine is exactly the same. The propellers, electronic speed controllers, printed circuit board and radio transmitters are identical. The navigation microchip for GPS and GLONASS systems are exactly the same. The only change on the assembly line happens at the final stage of payload integration. In the so-called civil and agricultural version, technicians attach a liquid fertilizer tank and a high-definition remote sensing camera. In the kamikaze military version, identical to the Shahed drones designed by Iran and mass-produced in Russia, engineers remove the camera and attach 40 or 50 kilograms of high-power plastic explosives. So my brother, what if Brazil starts manufacturing these components domestically or uses Brazilian companies to buy these parts from global suppliers on the international market, claiming to supply the agricultural and civil sectors? And later, if these parts are triangulated and exported to Russia under the protective mantle of BRICS trade, Brazil ceases to be a neutral player in global diplomacy. Brazil becomes an active part of Vladimir Putin's defense supply chain. Brazil becomes a direct accomplice and an indirect financier of acts of deceit and violations of international law. It's no wonder you've seen on YouTube, even here on our channel, several videos making it clear that Brazil is going to get into a conflict. If things continue at this level, if nothing is done by the people and this fake opposition that's out there, you, my brother, who's watching this video, now you can be drafted, that is, against your will, to fight in a conflict that isn't ours, to fight to defend the global communist regime. This is no joke, my brother. If you're sharp, you've already caught on to what's going on here. They're producing these drones, claiming they're for civilian use. But when these drones carry out their attacks, and the United States or Europe start analyzing who made that equipment, and find out it was Brazil, things are going to get serious, my brother. Troops won't come here immediately. Nowadays, the squeeze happens through economic pressure. And if these facts are already making you uneasy, if you're already worried about the real possibility of having to deal with trouble that's not yours, my son, I haven't even gotten to the worst part yet. Just like they do in movie scripts, although this is real and these are facts, I saved the best for last. The Russian move against the Brazilian state wasn't limited to industrial trade meetings in New Delhi. It went deeper into the most protected and sensitive heart of Brazilian military sovereignty, something we've never had before. While the Brazilian population followed superficial political debates and everyday distractions, the Brazilian government opened the doors to the country's most strategic and secretive naval facilities. For the physical presence and direct inspection by one of the Kremlin's most dangerous, feared, and powerful men. I'm talking about none other than Nikolai Patrushev. The gravity of this fact requires us to understand exactly who Nikolai Patrushev is. Patrushev is not an ordinary diplomat, nor a career bureaucrat from the commercial sector. He is one of the oldest and most loyal members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle of power. He succeeded Putin himself as the head of the FSB, the Federal Security Service of Russia, the espionage and counterintelligence agency that replaced the legendary and feared Soviet KGB. For 16 long years, from 2008 to 2024, Patrushev led the Security Council of the Russian Federation, being the mastermind and executor of the most aggressive geopolitical strategies of the Russian regime. Currently, he holds the position of direct advisor to President Putin and chairs the Maritime Council of Russia. Public investigations conducted by intelligence agencies and the judiciary of the United Kingdom identified Nikolai Patrushev as the operative who most likely gave direct approval. Political assassinations using chemical and radiological agents abroad, including the case of former agent Alexander Levitsky in London. He is the embodiment of Russia's intelligence apparatus, espionage, and psychological operations. What was the Brazilian government's stance on this figure? First, Patrushev landed in Brasilia and was received at a high-level meeting at the Planalto Palace directly with the office of the president. A meeting that, scandalously, was omitted and did not appear on the official public schedule released to the public. Secondly, the doors of the most restricted military facilities of the Brazilian Navy in Rio de Janeiro were thrown wide open for the former head of the KGB. Patrushev was taken on board and personally inspected the NAM, Atlântico A-140, the Brazilian Navy's multi-purpose aircraft carrier. The Atlântico is not just any ship. It is the flagship, the largest warship in all of Latin America, and the nerve center of our naval and amphibious power projection. A vessel equipped with radar systems, command and control centers, troop transport capability, and the ability to operate aircraft and helicopters. As if walking on the deck of our main warship wasn't enough, Putin's right-hand man visited the Navy arsenal in Rio de Janeiro and held closed-door meetings with the highest commanders of Brazil's armed forces. With the Ministry of Defense and with the Special Advisor to the Presidency for International Affairs, none other than Celso Amorim. During these meetings, according to reports from the independent press, as reported by Gazeta do Povo and international media, Patrushev openly offered Brazil Russian nuclear technology, cooperation agreements in military naval engineering, exploration of underwater resources in deep waters, and direct partnerships with the research centers of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, UFRJ. the official pretext to strengthen the technological sovereignty of Russia and Brazil. And that's where the question comes in. But what kind of sovereignty are they talking about? Opening up the flagship of our navy, our military arsenal, and our academic naval engineering system to the former director of the FSB and Putin's mastermind of schemes has absolutely nothing to do with sovereignty. This is about blind submission and an act of unbelievable strategic vulnerability. Brazil allowed the espionage and military industry of an aggressive power to map and access its national defense infrastructure. Can you imagine, my brothers, if in 2026, by any chance, a conservative government takes office, what if this guy says no to this kind of thing? According to Russia, this government would be seriously threatened, since the enemy knows all our weaknesses and capabilities. And that is truly high treason against the homeland. By connecting all these dots, the proposal for triangulated production of civilian and military drones, the unconditional opening of naval bases, for Putin's right-hand man and the cooperation agreements. Within the BRICS framework, the geopolitical conclusion is inescapable and crystal clear. Brazil is actively choosing to align itself with what is most authoritarian, aggressive, and destabilizing in contemporary global geopolitics. The Brazilian government is auctioning off the reputation for neutrality and constructive pragmatism of Itamaraty's diplomacy, which was built over more than a century. This is to turn the country into a technical support satellite for the Kremlin's expansionist ambitions. And if anyone in the offices of Brasilia genuinely believes that the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the other Western powers will passively watch this move, that person is living in a childish illusion. The response from the European continent, which lives under the direct threat of Russian missiles, territorial expansionism, and the United States, will come with devastating and relentless economic force. And this response will not come through formal diplomatic protests, but rather through an overwhelming package of secondary economic sanctions and financial isolation. And what do the secondary sanctions imposed by the United States OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, and by the European Union against a third country that helps Russia mean in practice? It means that any Brazilian bank that carries out transactions, finances, or moves funds for companies involved in the triangulation of drone parts or naval agreements with Russia will be immediately cut off from the SWIFT network. SWIFT, for those who don't know, is the international banking system that allows the transfer of funds between countries. Without access to the SWIFT code, a country's economy is disconnected from the rest of the world in a matter of seconds. It means that the dollar and the euro will disappear from the national market. Credit cards issued in Brazil will stop working abroad. Brazilian investors, global pension funds, and large multinational companies will pull tens of billions of dollars out of Brazil's financial market in an unprecedented capital flight. The stock market will plummet and the exchange rate will skyrocket, devaluing the national currency and brutally eroding the population's purchasing power. If you think times are tough now, my brother, if this happens, you look back on this time with longing. You'll really miss the current prices of food, fuel, and everything else. And the worst part, if this happens, is yet to come. Brazilian agribusiness, which is responsible for sustaining the country's trade balance, will also face immediate embargoes in the North American and European markets. Soybeans, meat, corn, coffee, and orange juice will face severe retaliation. No democratic country will continue buying commodities from a nation that acts as a logistical supplier for aggressors of Ukraine, who will not stop at Ukraine. This conflict was never just about Ukraine, but it's a Russian expansion. If this diplomatic and military recklessness is not immediately contained and reversed by the institutions, by the pressure of civil society, by the National Congress, and by the productive sector, the final fate of Brazil is already written in the tragic pages of geopolitical history. Brazil will not become an industrial power, nor a respected leader in the global south. Brazil will be turned into the new Cuba of the South American continent. Since I know there are always those who doubt, carefully observe the mirror of history and the tragedy of the Cuban people. The island of Cuba, in the 1960s and 1970s, made the ideological and geopolitical decision to align itself unconditionally with the Soviet Union. turning its territory into a spearhead and a forward outpost for provoking the West. What was the cumulative result over the decades? Relentless economic sanctions, global banking isolation, absolute technological obsolescence, collapse of basic infrastructure, daily energy rationing, widespread shortages of food and medicine, and the mass exodus of its population seeking survival in other countries. Cuba became an economic fossil, kept in misery by the irresponsible ideological decisions of its rulers. It is exactly down this path of ruin and isolation that the Brazilian government is leading the country by associating itself with the dirty tricks and espionage maneuvers of Vladimir Putin. Literally, these guys lost Venezuela, have Cuba isolated, and now they want a new frontman, and Lula is handing over our nation. A continental country with over 200 million inhabitants, with one of the largest agricultural outputs on Earth, with enviable mineral resources and a highly productive people, is at real and imminent risk of being pushed into the condition of an international pariah. We will be isolated from Western trade, deprived of cutting-edge technologies, subject to rampant inflation, currency devaluation, and systemic impoverishment. And all this for what? To serve as an industrial front and logistical dispatcher of military parts for an autocratic regime and aggressor of Western Europe. The crossroads facing the Brazilian people and their leaders at this very moment is decisive and unforgiving. Either Brazil, that is, Brazilians, immediately reclaim their tradition of diplomatic neutrality, respect for international law, the sovereignty of peoples, and commercial partnerships with the free and democratic world, or the country will continue advancing on this self-destructive path of naval cooperation and triangulated production of military technology with Russia, thus accepting to pay the catastrophic price of economic sanctions, the bankruptcy of agribusiness, and irreversible change, that is, the transformation of Brazil into the largest Cuba in Latin America. The time to warn, pressure, and prevent this diplomatic and economic disaster is running out quickly. If these agreements with the Kremlin are formalized and put into practice, the damage will be permanent, and the cost of this irresponsibility will fall on every Brazilian family. This is the end of our video. But the story shouldn't end here, it should begin. People need to wake up, and you can help by sharing this video and showing it to someone else who thinks everything is normal, who is buying into the rotten narratives of this media that's out there, cozy with those in power. It's true that what these guys want most, my brothers, is literally to dominate our country. If they have to align themselves with the communists and completely wreck the country for that, they don't care. So, my brother, if you don't want to live in a completely isolated country that could even forcefully draft you one day to defend those responsible for this, do your part. Those who refuse to see reality, sitting back and pretending this isn't happening, end up becoming accomplices. So don't be that person. Do your part. God bless you, my brothers. Hugs, and we're in this together. F you!